Planned Parenthood has been working on a plan to expand resources here in Colorado and across the region. That will mean more brick and mortar clinics, increased staffing, and more access to telemedicine care.
A couple of states already have activated their trigger laws. This includes Missouri and Alabama. Colorado could become an island when it comes to abortion access and care. Several neighboring states are expected to restrict abortion access, and more people could come here. More abortions are happening here for people who are not Colorado residents. More than 1,500 people came here from other states to get an abortion. Visitors accounted for 14% of abortions in Colorado last year, according to data from the State Department of Health. The most came from Wyoming and Texas. State data shows 11,580 abortions were recorded in Colorado last year, though the state says that's likely an undercount. That was the highest number we've seen since 2009.
Questions about what this is going to mean for patients and their health. So we want to talk to our expert here, 9 Health expert, Dr. Kyle Coley. The word abortion, we talk about abortion stories. It's a really broad word under the umbrella of healthcare. So let's talk about specifically what you're seeing as far as the impact on women's healthcare when we see this decision from the Supreme Court.
You know, the impact of taking away the ability to terminate a pregnancy, I think, is going to be huge. In fact, what we're going to see, based on data that we have from pre-1973, before abortion was legal, and also data from other countries where there's restricted access to abortions, is that the number of abortions is not going to go down. They're just going to have more unsafe abortions. And what that means is more complications, more deaths, and more maternal complications. In fact, modeling from University of Colorado tells us that we're expected to see a 7% increase in that number in the first year and a 21% increase in subsequent years.
We're also going to see this landscape across the country where some states are going to protect abortion rights. Colorado is one of these states. Some states are not going to and are already moving to do so, like Missouri. How do you see this working for these healthcare decisions with women who live in different states?
You know, I think it's going to be really tricky because the healthcare decision to terminate a pregnancy, the person that can best make that decision is the patient and their healthcare provider locally. And when they don't have access to their healthcare provider, let's say I lived in Texas and I needed to make a decision about whether to terminate or not, I don't have a resource to go to be able to have that decision locally. I'm going to have to make it alone and decide to go to another state. I'm also curious to hear what the White House is going to do about whether these types of activities would be allowed or they would be considered criminal from a provider's perspective to direct patients to go to other states to get these types of resources.
So not even the action of the abortion, but the conversation around the decision-making process.
Which is actually one of the most important things when it comes to decision-making. And I like to think of abortion not just as a choice, but almost as a medical procedure, or sometimes a medical intervention or treatment, because oftentimes an abortion is done to save mom's life. An abortion is done because the fetus is not going to be viable outside of the womb, or an abortion is done for a whole host of other medical reasons that are not necessarily an option, but more a treatment.
And that leads me to my next question, which is this is an ethical conversation for a lot of patients too. This doctor in the story right before here talked about this being really difficult for decision for a lot of wanted pregnancies. Can you talk about some of the decision making that patients will have to make now? That may be different.
You know, I think they're going to have to make not just the medical decision making, but the ethical decision making as well. So, you know, as an example, let's say that you have a pregnancy from a product of rape. The mental health effects of denying that woman the option to terminate that pregnancy, to force her to carry it to term and then raise that child, I think they're going to be long lasting. Similarly, if you have a fetus that's not viable, a baby that's going to be born still, basically, but you still have to carry it to term, you can imagine that could result in potentially, you know, lifelong trauma for the mother as well as other members of the family. And, you know, Jenny, we talk a lot about IVF because now it's such a common thing. 2% of all pregnancies now are, you know, IVF pregnancies. And many of these states are saying that life begins at conception, as soon as fertilization occurs. So if you're undergoing in vitro fertilization, you've made embryos in a petri dish. All of those embryos are considered fetuses because they have the potential for life. So what are the implications going to be?
For fertility treatments, for fertility clinics all over the country, those are in all these states that are going to have some of these laws as well.
That's exactly right. For the parents, what to do with the embryos, if it has a genetic defect, are you allowed to discard it? Would that be a criminal offense to do so? And also for providers, it leaves us in a lurch as to not know what to do.
I don't know if a lot of people know yet what's going to happen with some of these secondary questions, right? Not the immediate question in front of us. Well, thank you for helping us pick through some of this today. It is complicated, it is emotional, and we'll see what happens next. Dr. Kyle Coley, thank you.